Hello guys, my name is Samantha Feti Sabari and I will be discussing the topic civil rights movement in the United States during the 1960s. Okay, first off, what is the what is in the middle of the 20th century, the United States was rocked by a nationwide movement for equal rights for African Americans and for an end to the racial segregation and exclusion that had been enforced by the law and the practice throughout the Jim Crow era. Um, the Jim Crow laws were state and local laws introduced in the southern United States in the late 19th and early 20th centuries that had been enforced racial segregation. Jim Crow being a pejorative term for an African American. Yeah, they were racist. The last of the Jim Crow laws were generally overturned in 1965. So the civil rights evolved in the 1960s against the backdrop of the Cold War by those who opposed discrimination because the activists were not just young black men and women, but they were also from the middle class and middle aged. Like at that time, like there was like very it was an unfair environment for everyone, especially to the people with color, the African Americans. Them, yeah, the civil rights activists that fought to end discrimination were prominently demonstrated mainly by students, religious figures, and even the highest authority, the president. They brought they brought to light the discrimination faced by African Americans and people of color. The first civil rights activists that I will talk about are the students in the 1960s. A new student movement came about because they wanted swifter changes when it came to the segregation South. They expressed their discontent in several ways such as confrontational protests, marches, boycotts, and sit-ins. One prominent example was in a department store where four African American students decided to participate in a sit-in at a whites only lunch counter. Like so at that time like there like black people weren't allowed to eat in specific kinds of restaurant where mostly white people can only eat. So those restaurants were like the high end and like only for them kind of thing. So those students, those four American black uh, American African students like protested by like sitting in the restaurant where all only white people can eat, where only white people can eat, and it was a big deal at that time because it's like a hierarchy, and then the four students were just like, no, I'm gonna sit here and protest. Like that's what they did at that time, and it's actually a very powerful thing to actually do at that time because black people can be the at that time black people of color were kind of what do you can you say that then were kind of blamed for everything, and then they they can easily be beaten up without you don't need no need without a fight, and it's actually a very common thing actually when they were like when the students were when sit-ins in lunch in restaurants only for white people. They wouldn't they would sit on that on, on they would stay on the restaurant, so they would sit on the restaurant. They won't stop until they were served like human beings because you know this eventually led to the desegregation of department stores. The student activist was so influential that many other demonstrations that popped up in the South. There was a group dedicated to this cause for change called SNCC, aka the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. It had prominent student activists like Julian Bond, Stokely Carmichael, Diane Nash, and John Lewis, just to name a few. This group was formed when Ella Barker, a civil rights activist, and SCLC, Southern Christian Leadership Conference official, invited these students activists to a meeting in Raleigh, North Carolina. This group consisted mostly of black college students who practiced peaceful and direct action protests. Overall, this proved that students could enact social change when it came to the civil rights movement. So let's first discuss one of the most important people of the change of the civil rights movement in the United States in 1960s. Ella Baker actually. Ella Josephine Baker, that's her complete name, was an African American civil rights and human rights activist. She was a largely behind the scenes organizer. Like she was not necessarily the front, whose career spanned more than 5 decades. In New York City and the South, she worked alongside some other most noted civil rights leaders of the 20th century. And then let's talk about the some of the students that are very important in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. First off, we have Horace Julian Bond, was an American social activist, leader of the civil rights movement. Now he's a politician, a professor, and a writer. While he was a student at Morehouse College in Atlanta, that's where he went to college, and that's where mostly the students, the four students, went to school with. Atlanta and Georgia during the early 1960s, he helped establish the Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Next we have is Stokely Carmichael is best known for popularizing the slogan Black Power, which in the mid 1960s galvanized a movement toward more militant and separatist assertions of black identity, nationalism, and empowerment, and away from liberal. Yeah, that's right. Next, we have another student with her name is Diane Nash. She's actually Diane Nash, and she played a crucial role in sustaining freedom rides initiated by the Congress of the Racial Equality. From her base in Nashville, she coordinated student efforts to continue the rides into Mississippi and serve as a liaison between the press and the United States Department of Justice. Last but not least, John Lewis, a co-founder and the chairman of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Lewis led and helped organize many of the seminal moments in the civil rights movement, including the Freedom Rides, the 1963 March on Washington, and the Selma to Montgomery marches. Now, let's continue. I would say that they were successful, the students, by spreading their influence throughout the nation, by spreading awareness of the discontent African Americans were facing with discrimination. And they started making good progress towards ending segregation. One example was the desegregation of Woolworth's department stores. Religious figures also played an important role in the civil rights movement. There was a group called the SCLC, or Southern Christian Leadership Conference, whose goal was to redeem the soul of America. This organization was established in the 1957 to coordinate the actions and endeavors of many local protest groups. One such example is when they joined the SNCC and NAACP, which came to be known as the Albany Movement. The reason it was called this is because the civil rights activists decided to protest in Albany for change because this city had been known for entrenched segregation and racial violence. Okay, and moving on, let's go to our main topic and, talk about it because that's literally the main topic, and I spent 10 minutes. Anyway, the American Civil Rights Movement, a pivotal period in the U.S. history, had a profound impact on American society. But its direct influence on the Philippines during the 1960s and 1990s was limited. While the Philippines had its own struggle with inequality and discrimination, its social and political landscape was shaped by different historical and cultural factors. However, some indirect connections and parallels can be drawn between the two movements. The inspiration for Filipino activism. The success of the American Civil Rights Movement, particularly in the nonviolent resistance tactics employed by Martin Luther King Jr. I think everyone already knows him, so I'm not gonna explain who he is. Provided inspiration for Filipino activists fighting for social justice and equality in the Philippines. The movement demonstrated the power of collective action and potential for change through peaceful means. The broader international context of the civil rights civil rights movement, with its focus on the human rights and equality, resonating with the Filipinos who were also grappling with issues of societal injustice and political oppression. So in the 1960s, the Philippines was also not very good, and because of that, it indirectly or may have inspired the Filipinos to do the same thing like the Americans did. The movement's global reach helped to raise awareness of these issues and encourage Filipinos to advocate for their own rights. That's right. Labor movements and migrant workers. So, you know how the Philippines has a lot of unequal pay and something like that in the 1960s. The American Civil Rights Movement coincided with the rise of labor movements in the United States, particularly among the migrant workers. Filipinos who had migrated to the U.S. in large numbers during the early 20th century played a significant role in these labor movements, particularly in the agricultural sector. The Delano Great Strike of the 1960s, led by Filipino and Mexican farm workers, was a prime example how the civil rights movement inspired struggles for workers' rights and dignity. Yeah, the Delano Great, I'll explain it to you guys. So on September 8, 1965, over 800 Filipino farm workers affiliated with the Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee struck 10 grape vineyards around Delano. They demanded a raise both in their hourly wages from $1.25 to $1.40, and in the piece rate they pay a worker earned for each box of grape stacks. So you know how unfair that is? It's very unfair. It's very small. Last but not least is influence on the Philippine education. Civil rights movement also had an indirect influence on the Philippines education. The movement's emphasis on equality and access to education inspired Filipino educators and policymakers to advocate for reforms in the Philippine education system. This led to the expansion of educational opportunities for marginalized groups, including those from rural areas and ethnic minorities. So like equal rights, equal rights to go to school for everyone, equal education for everyone. While the American civil rights movement had a limited direct impact on the Philippines during the 1960s and the 1990s, its indirect influence and parallels with the Philippines' own struggles for social justice and equality are undeniable. The movement's global impact was inspired Filipino activists and contributed to a broader awareness of human rights and equality. However, the Philippines' unique historical context, cultural values, and focus on national identity shapes its own societal and political movement, leading to distinct challenges and solutions. So I'm just gonna because I think the video is too short. So I'm just gonna talk about the different kinds of revolution that the Filipinos did, and that it indirectly was inspired by the civil rights movement back in the United States. I think I've talked about the Delano grape strike, right? I talked about it. Alright, we're not gonna waste more time on it, so let's do the other one. It's called the People's Power Revolution 1986. While not directly tied to the civil rights movement, the People Power Revolution, which led to the overthrow of Ferdinand Marcos, I think we knew him, drew inspiration from the peaceful protests and demonstrations of the civil rights era. Filipinos, inspired by the success of the nonviolent resistance in the United States, took the streets in massive numbers, demanding democracy and an end to Marcos' authoritarian rule. This event highlighted the power of peaceful resistance and its ability to bring about the significant political change. The next is the anti-terror law protestants. Oh, it's actually very recent. Can I even add this? I don't think I can add this since it's not in the it's the anti-terror law protest is in 2020. we're not gonna talk about that actually. Alright, so I'm just gonna end it here. The American Civil Rights Movement, though occurring in different contexts, continues to resonate in the Philippines. Its message of equality and justice serves as a reminder of the ongoing struggle for human rights and the power of collective action. As rights and power of collective action, as we look towards the future, we must remember the lessons of the past and strive to create a more and just and equitable society for all of us. I am Samantha Fiti Sabari, and this is my video. Sir, ingon ka sir, usara ka topic ako sir, usara ka topic ang istoryahan. Dayon, basta, thank you sir, bye.